तो कभी ना नेक्स्ट वाले में कंसल्टेंट में सार भी आपका बोला था सर ये क्या है हमें तो करना पड़ेगा. इसलिए ये स्मॉल ग्रुप डिस्कशन एक्टिविटी इसमें भी एक्टिविटी ट्राइंग टू इन्वॉल्व मोर पीपल एंड एक्टिव इन्वॉल्वमेंट है. आप लोग जब खुद टीचर्स बनेंगे या यू कैन गाइड अपनी स्कूल को यू कैन ऑलवेज एम्प्लॉय दिस. सर वो एक
Good morning, everyone. Today's topic of the discussion is Jean Piaget and cognitive development, and my moderator is Dr. Veena ma'am. Introduction. Piaget was born in 1896 in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. Jean Piaget died in 1980, was considered to be a natural scientist, psychologist, sociologist, and a historian of the philosophy of science. His major enterprise was that he termed genetic epistemology, the study of development of logic, reasoning, and high-level thinking. Epistemology is the study of nature and acquisition of knowledge. Piaget's approach was genetic in the sense that it focused on origins, genesis, and development. That is, the word does not refer to genes and heredity itself. In 1969, Piaget became the first European to receive the American Psychological Association's Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award for his creation of empirical science of epistemology. His personal life, he was married to Valentine Shatner in 1923, and Jacqueline, Lucine, and Lauren were his three children whose intellectual development from infancy was studied by Piaget. He gave the basic cognitive concepts given by Piaget were equilibration, briefly defined as a compensation for an external disturbance. Equilibration can be thought of as a dynamic process of give and take as the organism strives to take in new and challenging information and adjust to this new input. It is the tendency of the developing individual to stay in balance intellectually by filling in gaps in knowledge and by restructuring beliefs when they fail to test out against reality. Assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is an inward-directed tendency of a structure to draw environmental events towards itself. It means modifying one's environment so that it fits into one's already developed ways of thinking and acting. For example, when a child hoists a banana and runs around in a circle shouting, "Look, it's a jet," the child is assimilating the banana into ways of thinking and behaving that are already in place. Accommodation. It is an outward tendency of the inner structure to adapt itself to a particular environmental event. It means modifying oneself so as to fit in with existing characteristics of the environment. For example, the child who for the first time manages to peel a banana and adjust his mouth so that the banana will fit into it has accommodated his ways of thinking and behaving to the banana as it really is. The child who accommodates to the banana, adjusting his ways of folding his hand and his mouth, also simulates the banana by chewing and swallowing. Thus, equilibration is not a static, balanced system, but a dynamic, mobile equilibration between assimilation and accommodation as the child responds to the environment. Structuralism or schema. A scheme is the structure or organization of actions as they are transferred or generalized by repetition in similar or analogous circumstances. Schemata exist in the infant as perceptual motor behavior patterns. Example, the grasping reflex. It is an action sequence guided by thought. For example, when infants suck, they are exercising a sucking scheme. Therefore, sucking is primitive and not very flexible in style. They need to adjust the way they hold their mouth so as to fit the object being sucked, for example, a nipple. In making the necessary adjustments, they accommodate the sucking scheme to the shape of the nipple. This allows them to simulate it into the sucking scheme. This combination of assimilation and accommodation results in an adaptive behavior that is sucking effectively that helps the infant survive. Schema is more commonly used to refer to an early mental structure, whereas general schemata resulting from the use of higher intelligence are referred to as operations. Piaget's stages of cognitive development. He gave 4 stages of cognitive development: sensory motor stage, birth to 2 years, pre-operational or intuitive stage 2 to 7 years, concrete operational stage 7 to 12 years, and formal operational stage from 12 years on. First is sensory motor stage. The sensory motor period of intelligence is so named because the child's construction of mental schemata is in no way aided by representations, symbols, or thoughts. Rather, schemata depend totally on perceptions and bodily movements. So, there are further 6 substages of sensory motor stage. Number 1, inborn motor and sensory reflexes. This stage begins at 1 month of life. This includes few organized reflexes that stand out from the spontaneous general activity of the neonate, such as the sucking reflex and the palmar reflex. Second substages, first habits and primary circular reaction, which is from 1 to 4 months. Primary circular reactions occur when by chance the infant experiences a new consequence of a motor act and tries to repeat the act. For example, scratching the sheet with one finger, thus producing an interesting sound, then scratching it repeatedly in order to recreate the sound. Secondary circular reactions, from 4 to 8 months, the infant repeats a particular action pattern that achieved one end for the purpose of achieving another unrelated ends. For example, scratching the paper very hard, then very lightly as if to see whether the sound varies. Fourth is the use of familiar means to obtain ends. This stage lasts from 8 to 12 months. The child starts to understand the difference between means and end, which is cause and effect. Fifth is tertiary circular reaction and discovery through active experimentation. This is from 12 to 18 months. This stage is marked by a search for new means based on further differentiations of already known schemata. The child explores the environment and varies means to test for effectiveness. Discovery is the hallmark of stage 5. For example, a child may use a stick to move an object that is not within the reach. This is an example of primary diagram depicting primary, secondary, and tertiary circular reactions. In primary circular reaction, the action and response both involve infant's own body. The baby enjoys sucking, baby sucks his thumb. In secondary circular reaction, action gets a response from another person or object, leading to babies repeating the original action. And in tertiary circular reaction, action gets one pleasing result, leading the baby to perform similar actions to get similar results. Sixth is insight and object permanence. From 18 months onwards, in stage 6, the child becomes capable of inventing new means, not by direct actions on objects, but by mental combination. This is a crucial shift in the nature of the child's thought that has been carried on through sensory and motor activities, increasingly carried on internally. Object permanence is the idea that objects continue to exist even when we can no longer see them. This is an example diagram showing object permanence, and in figure 1, the child A fails to search for the toy once it has been removed, once its view has been blocked. This means that he does not know that that objects continue to exist even when they have been removed from the environment. And in the figure B, the child seizes the object through the barrier, which shows that he has attained object permanence. Second is pre-operation subperiod, which is from 2 to 7 years. The advent of the pre-operational subperiod is marked by the appearance of semiotic functions. It consists in the ability to represent something, a signified object, event, conceptual scheme, etc., by means of a signifier like language, mental image, symbolic gesture, and so on. The semiotic function is heralded by 5 characteristic behavior patterns. Number 1 is deferred imitation. Imitation is a behavior in which the subject's scheme of action are modified by the external world without his utilizing this external world. For example, the child may put on his father's hat and walk as the father does, even hours after the father has gone off to work. Second is symbolic play. Symbols are generated to express everything in the child's life experience that cannot be formulated and assimilated by means of language alone. For example, a little girl may pretend that she is asleep, that a box is a pet cat, or that she is a church. Third is drawing. Drawing is halfway between symbolic play and mental image, appearing at approximately 2 to 2.5 years of age. The child enjoys producing drawings for their own sake. Fourth is mental image. Mental images are a construction, something that the child creates. It is not directly given by perceptual input. It is constructed by the process of accommodation. Verbal evocation of events. The new representational ability is supported by the social system of language. For example, Papa, bye-bye, while pointing to the path he had taken when he left. Egocentrism. It means an inability to take the point of view of another person. Pre-operational children tend to assume that others see the world just as they themselves see it. It does not mean selfishness, but it instead refers to an intellectual limitation. Animism. Pre-operational children also display animism, the belief that inanimate objects which have certain characteristics of living beings, such as motion, are in fact alive. For example, in this picture, if we start with two groups, one of 4-year-olds and one of 8-year-olds, and show them two sticks pictured below and ask them to compare it and to tell if they are equal length, most of the 4-year-olds will say that the segment B is longer than segment A. Older children have flexible logical operations which allow them to reverse the movements of the sticks mentally. They can imagine returning sticks to their original configuration, and they know if they did so, A and B would be identical. The younger children, by contrast, do not have flexible logical operations. Their thinking suffers from irreversibility, and their judgments are thus dominated by perceptual appearances. B does look longer than A, and that is enough to convince the pre-operational child. Concrete operations from 7 to 11 years of age. This stage involves a major advance in the power of child's reasoning. Recall that in the imaginary experiment with the Muller-Eye illusion, the operational child was fooled by perceptual appearances. That segment A, the segment B is longer than segment A. In the period of concrete operation, children are no longer fooled. They recognize that the length of a particular stick will remain fixed so long as nothing is added or taken away from it. Thus, they have learned one of the nature's constants, the principle of conservation of length and other physical entities like area, number, and mass. They believe in this principle because their mental action now shows reversibility. For example, in this, even if the length of the beaker or the width of the beaker is different, the child knows it contains the same amount of water. Fourth is the formal operations, which is beyond 12 years of age. In this stage, thinking becomes quite adult-like. This does not mean that we learn no new facts or skills after 16. It means that the basic processes we used to think do not change much beyond this age. A general feature of formal operational thought is the ability to think in terms of the abstract concepts that link concrete objects or action together. There are other interlocking capacities which contribute to formal operation. These are hypothetical thinking. The children move from the world of actual to the world of hypothetical. They can still think about the way things are, but they become much more skilled at thinking about how things might be if certain changes took place. For example, if we gave the following sentence to a 9-year-old and a 17-year-old, I'm glad I don't like onions, but if I like them, I would always be eating them, and I hate eating unpleasant things. The 9-year-olds would probably focus on the concrete aspects of what was said. They would give answers like true onions taste awful or onions aren't so bad. The 17-year-old will be much more likely to be focused on the logic of the hypothetical situation, noting that if I liked onions, they wouldn't be unpleasant with them. Second is deduction and induction. Reduction is reasoning from abstract. Inductive thinking is the complementary process of observing a number of specific events or instances and inferring an abstract general principle to explain those instances. For example, we may figure out from a number of specific observations some general principles by which people can become attractive to the opposite sex, which is inductive reasoning. And then we may have tried to use those general principles to generate specific hypotheses about how we should behave in order to attract one particular member of opposite sex, which is deductive reasoning. Interpropositional logic. Formal operations involve the ability to judge whether propositions are logically connected to one another, regardless of whether the propositions are true. Reflective thinking. It is the process of evaluating or testing your own reasoning. Reflective thinking allows the formal operational person to be his or her own critic, to evaluate a process, idea, or solution from the perspective of an outsider and to find error or weak spot in it. The reflective thinker can then sharpen plans, arguments, or points of view, making them more effective. Take-home points. Piaget used direct observation methods and began observing the development of his own children, which contributed to the construction of his theory. Piaget's theory is based on 4 stages or periods. Children move from one stage to another when they reach the appropriate maturation level and have been exposed to certain relevant experiences. And Piaget suggested that the stages do not end abruptly and that transition takes place slowly by moving to the next stage. Thank you.
What are the stages? Moderation. The question is involved. Basically, pronunciation.
Jean Piaget.
Yes. He's a Swiss now. Basically, easy to remember. Sensory motor is the sensation is pre-operational is for logic. It is logic. It is the pre-logic state. And that is also thinking state. And then thinking. Then operational is complete logic. And then operation is तो इतना ब्रॉडली याद रखेंगे ठीक रहेगा पता है कि अभी तो हमने समझ पा लिया है खुद it doesn't just the cognitive development की जो stages है वो सभी follow कर रहा है डिले हो गया कि cognitive development you can use this information these stages in order to evaluate correct certification the child is not able to obtain logic symbolic playing and the arts are symbolic delay maturation global development basically सेंसरी मोटर स्टेज खत्म हो गई तो एक ऑब्जेक्ट करने में समझ थी तो समझता है कि ऑब्जेक्ट चलेगी और फिर एग्जिस्ट करता है तो इनिशियली रिप्रेजेंटेशन है तो वो रिप्रेजेंटेशन जाता है कि आदमी एग्जिस्ट कर रहा है मेरे रीजन में नहीं मेरे सेंसरी फील्ड में इट इज एग्जिस्टिंग तो पास्ट का तरफ से मिला इनसे 4 साल में मुझे पास्ट एक्सपीरियंसेस मतलब रियलाइज करना शुरू किया तो पहले प्रेजेंट में रहता वो हो रहा होगा मुझे पता तो वो लर्निंग इम्पोर्टेंट तो 3 से 4 साल में हो गया डॉक्टर वीना तो कमेंट स्कीमा मतलब बेसिकली नॉलेज बैंक का जो नॉलेज है उसके जो उसमें एक अपना जो एक्सपीरियंसेस से एक लैंग्वेज से नॉलेज बनानी दैट इज स्कीम लैंग्वेज चलो उसका बात नॉलेज में कुछ ऐड करना चाह रहा है एसिमुलेशन में उसे दिक्कत आती है एडजस्टमेंट करने में बच्चों को चेंज लाता है तो उसे इसे बैलेंस करता है तो ये डॉक्टर आदित्य आपने वो बताया रिवर्सिबिलिटी को थोड़ा सा बताएंगे
but in the next stage, when reversibility, the child acquired reversibility, he will be able to recognize that if the length of the street is full by it. Reversibility is that very common application.
अभी आ रहा पहले वाला
वो बता रहे हैं बट कुछ भी हो सकता है जो दिन टीम में पानी
सर चलेगा हमारे लीडर चलेगा हमारे देखने चले गए
ये नहीं साइकाइट्रिक इंडिकेशंस है एक्चुअली इसकी बात करें
ये psychiatric
जो ऑब्जेक्ट ये भी था कि जो बच्चों को थेरेपी करते हैं